When Melissa and I started Cults, Crimes, and Cabernet, it was a hobby. It quickly grew into advocacy when we decided we needed to do more for victims and their families than just talk.
Once a quarter, Whitney and I travel to locations where someone has gone missing or has been murdered. We meet with family members or case advocates in hopes to bring awareness to the unspeakable.
In an attempt to revive interest in these cases, we not only share an episode about their loved one, we also utilize action-oriented advocacy by handing out flyers, participating in foot searches, organizing honkin' waves, or helping raise funds.
We invite you, our listeners, to pop a cork and grab a glass because we have work to do.
This is Cults, Crimes, and Cabernet.
The Merlot Files. For this Merlot Files, we will be traveling to Forsyth County, Georgia. This county is within the Atlanta metropolitan area and has about 250,000 people living in it. It is the fastest growing county in all of Georgia, and I can understand why. This place is absolutely beautiful. The reason we are using the county and not the town is because this crime occurred in a rural area. Lots of small towns around, and more people would know of the county and hopefully remember something that happened there versus a small town most people have never heard of. Little Mill Road is a curvy 2-lane road without sidewalks or even much of a shoulder. There are many random hills in this area that would give any biker or walker a workout. This is a roadway that goes through a few towns, and from what we could see of it a few weeks ago, it has large, beautiful homes and trailer homes along it. These houses are sometimes surrounded by trees, while others are free from an obstructive view. Today's story takes place in 1997. So I'm sure the area looks vastly different 26 years later, but it still has that step back in time feel. The crime rate in Forsyth County is under the Georgia and the national average. However, this county does have a sordid past when it comes to racism.
Levi Dylan Frady was born on March 6, 1986, and was your typical 11-year-old boy. He loved riding his bike, hanging out with friends, and playing outside. He had a twin sister named Lacey, and his parents, Marilyn Parkman and Milton Frady, were divorced when the twins were just 3 years old, and they lived full-time with their mother. Levi's favorite food was pizza and his grandmother's pancakes. He may have been a thrill seeker. One of his cousins talked about how much he loved roller coasters, especially the one called Typhoon at the Forsyth County Fair. Just an adrenaline junkie. He was into science experiments, fishing, but most of all, riding his bike down Little Mill Road, waving at all of the neighbors. He was an active kid, and everyone knew him well. And with Halloween coming up, Levi wanted to dress up as G.I. Joe. He even took the money he made off of getting good grades from his report card to buy the family pumpkins to carve. But he would never get the chance to make those memories with his twin sister and his mom.
Levi and his sister were in the 6th grade attending North Forsyth Middle School, where he was a pretty popular kid. He didn't make the grades that his twin did, and he would much rather spend his time outdoor exploring than studying like his sister. Lacey was 1 minute older than Levi, and she took her job as the big sister very seriously. Levi was a bit on the shy side, so Lacey would look out for him quite a bit. I want to mention Levi's extended family lived in the area of Forsyth County for generations. The park down the street from Levi's house was named after his grandfather. A road was named after a great-grandmother. So it's safe to say people in this area knew the family well, even 11-year-old Levi. Of course, we will put photos of Levi on our social media sites, but honestly, he looks like an outdoorsy 11-year-old boy that had his whole future ahead of him.
And even though Lacey's only 1 minute older than Levi, I find it so cute that firstborn is very academically forward, and the second-born is more just, let's go have fun. Because you see that across the board. Your boys are like that. My boys are like that. And I was like that. My sister's very smart and studious. And I was like, let's just go do something.
Yes, exactly. And 1 minute does not make a difference. It doesn't matter the amount of time. He's technically the second born.
Our timeline will start right after school on October 22nd of 1997. Levi rode the bus home without his sister Lacey. She had stayed back at school that particular day. He would have arrived at home sometime between 3:30 and 4:12. We know this because Levi would call his mother at work at exactly 4:12 to ask if he could go to a friend's house to do homework. He also tells her that they would be going to a different friend's house to play with him as well after they were finished with their studies. Marilyn says yes, he can go, but tells him to be home by 6:30 that evening. Levi grabs his backpack and heads for his bike. There are multiple witnesses along Little Mill Road that state they saw him riding his bike between 4:15 and 5 p.m. Levi will arrive at his first friend's house somewhere between 4:40 and 5:45. Yes, the time frames are not exact. When they pass a young boy on a bike, they don't think to glance at the clock on their vehicle because it's a normal occurrence. You pass kids out riding bikes all the time, especially in the late 90s.
Exactly.
Levi's at friend number 1's house. They both now head to friend number 2 so that they can all jump on the trampoline.
Sometime between 5:45 and 6 p.m., friend number 2 and his family leave to go out to dinner. They did ask Levi and friend number 1 if they wanted to come with them, but friend number 1 didn't have any money, so he was not going to go. Levi went inside the house to call his mom to see if he was able to go because he had money. His mom doesn't answer the phone at home because she hasn't arrived back from work after picking Lacey up from school. So friend number 1 and Levi leave and head back over to friend number 1's house. At 6:38, Levi calls his house phone to speak with his mother, but she is in the bath, so Lacey answers the phone. Marilyn tells Lacey to tell Levi to come straight home because it's already after 6:30, and that was the time he was supposed to be home. Levi would then tell Lacey that he didn't want to ride his bike home because he was scared of the dark and it was already about dusk time. And there were some dogs on the way home that would sometimes chase him and bark. By 6:50, Levi leaves his friend's house and heads home. He takes a different route to avoid the dogs that he was afraid of. A neighbor will see Levi riding his bike in the direction of friend number 2's house around 6:50. The neighbor also tells police a little black dog was following behind Levi.
A lost motorist is traveling down Little Mill Road when he sees a male between the ages of 35 and 60 years old, scraggly with unkempt hair. The motorist tries to ask this man for directions, but he would not respond to her when she spoke to him. This man then walks into the woods, and this is all very close to the location that Levi's bike would eventually be found. This witness stated she did not see a bike on the ground at that time. By 7 p.m., Levi should be home, and when he is not, his mother Marilyn calls his friend's house, but no one answers, so her and Lacey load up into their car to go and search for Levi. As they're pulling out of their long driveway, Marilyn's boyfriend pulls up. She tells him what's going on, and they make their way around the neighborhood. Lacey spots Levi's bike lying on the ground by a driveway to someone's house. She tells her mother, and for some reason, Marilyn doesn't hear her and just continues to drive to the friend's house. This is under a 5-minute drive. When they couldn't find Levi, the mother and daughter head back home by 7:35. Marilyn assumes her son is with a friend and goes to sleep. She wakes up at 2 a.m. and goes to check on him, but he is still not home, so she sets out to search for him again.
By 6 a.m., a woman is leaving for work and sees the bike right next to her driveway. Her husband had seen it the night before when he got home from work and kind of talked about it being out there. She doesn't move it. She just continues on her way to work. At 6:45, the children from the same house, they leave to walk to the bus stop, and the bike is still there. They pick it up and move it closer to the ditch next to their driveway.
They probably thought they were preserving it so that no one would hit it with their car, or when the bus pulls over to the side of the road a little bit, that nothing was ruined on the bike.
Yes, that's what I have in my mind as well. Back at the house, Lacey speaks to her father at 7:02 a.m., but she never mentions that Levi didn't come home and that he's currently missing. At 7:30, Marilyn calls the houses of Levi's friends to let them know she's looking for him and actually just ask if they've seen him, if he's still there or anything like that. She then travels over to their houses, and other family members are searching for Levi at this point as well. So we have the grandpa out. Their whole family, extended family, is in this area, so they're all starting to search for Levi. The other relatives that are out, they find Levi's bike in the ditch, and they take it back to Marilyn's house. But then they think better of that and return it to where it was found so authorities will know exactly where it was at. At 8 a.m., Levi is officially reported missing by his mother to the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office.
By 10:30 a.m., ground searches are underway in the area that Levi went missing off of Little Mill Road. At 2 p.m., a couple of hunters were out on Dawson's Forest Wildlife Management Area in Dawson County. It's about 19 miles from Levi's house, so a good distance. This was the opening day of hunting season, and if anyone knows anything about hunting season in the South, it's a very serious deal.
I was thinking, they mentioned this multiple times in reports that it was opening season for hunting, and it was also, I believe, one of the games for the World Series. They mentioned that multiple times, and I think they did it to jog people's memory because you remember first day of hunting season. You remember, if you're really into baseball, World Series, and then that could jar your memories if you did see a little boy or not.
So this was opening day of hunting season, and these men were itching to get a buck. They ended up finding Levi Frady's body and alerted authorities. Late that night, a witness comes forward that says he was out hunting and he saw a blue truck with a white camper in the area around 10 o'clock in the morning. This witness also gave authorities a description of what this man looked like, and the fact that he was wearing dress clothes out in the middle of the woods was definitely strange.
Now for the crime scene details that are known. Levi was driven out to the site, and he was shot 3 times, once in the chest and 2 times in the head, in Dawson Forest Wildlife Area. He was then dumped in a rain-filled pit just a few yards from where he was killed. Police state he was not sexually assaulted. His backpack was found in the area that his body was found. A few things we know happened, but no details have been released. Levi called 911 twice in the weeks leading up to his murder. The call transcripts have never been released, and zero information is out there reveals what these calls could have been about.
We also put in a FOIA request, and we were not given any documentation because it is an active investigation.
Yes.
So let's start with Marilyn Parkman, Levi's mother, for possible people involved. She was obviously questioned by the police. She even took a polygraph test, which she states she passed. Many people on the internet are against Marilyn because she fell asleep after searching for Levi the first time and didn't wake up until 2 a.m. There could be a million scenarios why this happened, and maybe it has a little something to do with the 911 calls. Could she have narcolepsy or some other type of medical condition? Most of us have never been in her shoes, and we should all be thankful for that. So we shouldn't throw stones saying that we would never act that way, because until you're in that situation, you don't know how you would act. We don't have all the information. The police have kept this one pretty tight-lipped. Marilyn stated her boyfriend and an ex-boyfriend were questioned and given polygraph tests similar to hers. I don't feel the need to say their names, even though the outcome of their tests, if they had them, were not revealed.
The next person of interest that seems to be a viable option initially came from a police interrogation of a man by the name of Tommy Samples. Tommy was being interviewed because he was accused of stabbing another man named Marshall Talent in 2013. But this was actually the second time that Tommy was involved in an altercation that led to a stabbing with Marshall.
Which is crazy. How many times do you stab the same person?
I couldn't imagine being friends with someone after they stabbed me. That's
That line. Yeah.
Definitely. The first time occurred in 1997, just 39 days after Levi was killed. However, during the 2013 interrogation, Tommy made a comment about Marshall hitting or stabbing him with the gun that was used to kill Levi. His exact words were, "It was a long gun, the same one they shot Levi Frady with." I am obviously not a detective, but I would have followed up with some questioning about the murder of an 11-year-old that has been cold for a decade. However, this is not what police do. They gloss right over this statement and do not ask about this gun. The man that was stabbed, Marshall, he was interviewed in the hospital, and those recordings are online. Marshall tells police, and I quote, "There ain't no telling what he's coming out of his mouth with. He said I had something to do with the Levi Frady murder."
End quote.
Oh, end quote. Then the two investigators tell Marshall, and I quote, "We ain't worried about that. We ain't talking about that." And essentially they just say, "We're worried about you and your case, not anything to do with Levi." And you can find these videos of both the interrogation and the video of Marshall talking about it online.
That stresses me out to no end, because if someone has a lead in the murder of an 11-year-old boy, we need to talk about that. At least circle back to it. We'll come back to that in a moment, but we don't just dismiss it completely.
Especially because it's a cold case and everyone knows about this case.
An article came out in the Dawson County Advertiser and News that stated that there was a rumor that a man by the name of Jackson Talent, nicknamed Jackie, confessed to the murder while he was in jail. Authorities state this is untrue, and Jackie was only in custody because of some drug offenses. Do you recognize the last name of Jackie? Is he related to the guy that was stabbed? Apparently, Jackie was friends with some of Levi's family. Police stated that Jackie was interviewed in Levi's murder, but so was 600 other people. There have been 2 men that police have tried to get in contact with over the last 25 years. They say these men are not suspects, just possible witnesses, but let's be real. If these men have not been identified and police are still looking for them, they could have something to do with this awful crime.
The first person in question was seen walking along Little Mill Road in Forsyth County at 6:30 p.m. on October 22nd, the day Levi went missing. Based on the witness description, she is the one that asked for directions and the man would not respond to her. He is described as a white male in his late 50s with a scruffy gray beard. He was wearing a faded baseball cap and he walked in a stooped fashion,
which is very distinct. Not everyone walks hunched over. That's something that people would remember. The second person or potential witness was seen in the Dawson Forest Wildlife Management area. He is described as a white male, 45 to 55 years of age, clean shaven, 6 foot to 6'1", 6 foot 1 inch tall, slim build with white or gray hair. He was driving a 1980 to 1985 medium blue Toyota 2-wheel drive pickup truck with a white camper shell over the bed of the vehicle. Of course, we will have the composites of all of these men on our socials and our website.
I do want to state one other thing that came about because of Levi's murder. In the state of Georgia, they have Levi's Call. It is an investigation tool that can be activated only by local law enforcement agencies through a request to the GBI. When there is an abduction, or when an abduction is confirmed, investigators, there's certain criteria, just like the Amber Alert, they are able to put forth once all these criteria are met, and it goes along with the Amber Alert. I believe this one will actually run the alert at least twice in the first hour and then every hour for the next 3 hours. They also will run on, I believe, the television and radio station, if I'm not mistaken. And they put a photograph of the child as well. And this all came about because of Levi's disappearance.
That needs to be something that is not just Georgia-based. That needs to be a nationwide service.
I agree. Yes, most people have phones, but you can easily turn Amber Alerts off your phones because they scare you half to death. But it's vital that everyone gets this information.
I think it's proven that when people do get that loud Amber Alert, most people rush to silence their phone before they even look at it. They know it's an Amber Alert, and then they don't even read it.
I agree. If you are a regular listener, Whitney and I travel to the locations for our deep dives, also known as our Merlot files. If you're a new listener, welcome. And to give you a brief overview, this is our 8th deep dive, but for the first time, we chose a child. A few months ago, while searching for a case, Levi's name came up, and the fact that I have a son named Levi, who is 12 years old and loves the outdoors, hit very close to home. So, of course, we had to help any way we can to shed light on this horrific crime against an innocent child. Once the case was chosen, we got right to work. Freedom of information request, and read everything there was to read about the case. There is a lot out there about Levi. A man's name came up in our research that might know more about the crime, so we wrote to him in prison. First time for everything is the saying, and this was a bit out of our comfort zone, to say the least. But if this guy had answers, we were going to ask the questions. After all the research and requests for interviews, the only thing left to do was go to the location. We do this to not only get a feel for the area, so we're able to explain things better to you all, but to also help the families, case advocates, and law enforcement with anything that needs to be done. Unfortunately, this time we did not hear back from any of the people working on the case. We reached out to, I did a space there. Unfortunately, this time we did not hear back from any of the people working on the case we reached out to, but we moved forward with our plans for visiting the area.
December 3rd, 2022, Melissa, her husband Chris, and I drove to Dawson Forest Wildlife Management Area in Dawson County. The weather was raining on and off throughout the drive, and every now and then we'd come across a fog patch. The sun was covered by all of the clouds, and it gave us all an ominous feeling. This was the area where Levi's body was found. We were not able to drive or even hike to the exact location because there are no trespassing signs everywhere, and we are not the type to break the laws. We got a feel for the dense woods, very few inhabited houses, and quite a few abandoned homes covered in weeds and vines. We're talking about the actual houses, not just the yard or surrounding land. We could tell these places have not had human contact in years. About 20 yards before we came to a gate that prevented us from going forward was an old cemetery. This only added to the eerie feeling that we all had. We sat in the car at the end of the road and took a minute to get lost in a thought about a little boy that was taken away too soon.
We wanted to retrace Levi's bike ride the night he was kidnapped. So off to Little Mill Road we went. This was about a 20-minute drive, and because of those curvy roads, it took us a few minutes to figure out the lay of the land. We learned there were multiple routes Levi could have rode his bike home that day. He had his normal route. That was the quickest from his house to his friend's house. Then there was the route he took home that night. He went missing. This route took us twice as long to drive as the first one. Like we said before, there weren't any sidewalks or even a paved shoulder for him to ride his bike on. He would have had to ride his bike in the road or on the grass. I would assume he cycled in the road because the hills would be difficult enough on pavement. The grass would have been way too difficult for him to ride on. This isn't a high traffic area, but because of the hills and the curves, it is very difficult for drivers to see if someone is up ahead. Levi's house was set back from the road and had many tall trees surrounding it. You could barely see the house from the street. I have never lived in a cabin in the woods, but this is what I would expect it to look like. Neighbors are on both sides of the house, and There's houses right across the street. We were able to tell which houses most likely were there in the 90s and which ones have been built since Levi disappeared. Not a word was said while we were leaving Forsyth County. All of us were in deep thought about how a preteen could be doing something that millions of kids do every day, something that brings them joy, only to be taken and killed by someone.
Levi Dylan Frady was kidnapped and murdered over 25 years ago, and authorities are no closer to solving this than the very day Levi's body was found, face up, in that water-filled pit. There are people that know who did this. Do not let another day go by without telling authorities what you know. Do it for the boy that will never grow up. Do it for Levi.
Anyone with information on the murder of Levi Frady or on the identity of the persons in the sketches is asked to contact the GBI tip line at 1-800-597-8477 or by writing Levi Frady Case, 189 Highway 53 West, Suite 201, Dawsonville, Georgia, 30534. I think this just goes to show you how old this case is if we're still going to be mailing stuff to the GBI.
Yes, absolutely. I'm sure you could also send an email to their generic tip line and get the same job done if you don't want to go buy a stamp. But the fact that they are still answering mail or would be willing to answer mail, I think that they'll take any tip they can get.
I completely agree. Also, remember, you can literally go to any of your local law enforcement agencies and talk about it, and they will put it through to who it needs to go to. I feel like you have to go directly here or contact these people directly.
Exactly.